Hello and welcome. My name is Al Barrows, and this is UFO Disclosure, the podcast that's meant to show an average person's reaction to all the UAP, UFO news from everywhere and anywhere. So, on a cold February evening back in 2016, the British military is believed to have ambushed a UFO in a heavily populated Welsh community. Join me as I relate this account I found on Bedtime Stories. So over the course of the evening, calls coming from the police switchboard became increasingly bizarre. One local resident had seen a squad of armed soldiers hurrying across a nearby field, apparently in pursuit of something. Another stated she had seen a huge pyramid-shaped object covered in red lights, silently hovering near her home. During the course of the evening, the police control room would struggle to cope with the volume of reports it was receiving, leading to several more frantic calls. It appears evident from the sheer volume of calls received by the police control room that something unusual did indeed take place in the skies over the region. And it seems equally clear that the residents contacting the authorities were utterly convinced that what they were witnessing was not of this earth. So the main witness to the evening's events is a local resident by the name of Kaz Clark. Clark said that the incident began on the 23rd when she and one of her friends noticed military planes circling the area. For the next 2 days, she continued to see unexpected aircraft in the skies above her village, both during the day and the hours of darkness. Then, around 2 a.m. on the 26th of February, she was in her back garden with two of her neighbors when they were disturbed by a loud drone in the skies overhead. Looking up, they saw a large military jet with what appeared to be a circular radar dish rotating above it. They watched on as the plane began to circle the area, apparently searching for something. It was then that they became aware of a vivid crimson light slowly descending over some nearby woodland. Clark and one of the neighbors decided to move in for a closer look. As she and her companion continued to observe, this light broke apart into a series of smaller, glowing red orbs, which began to align themselves into a roughly triangular formation. The space between these orbs suddenly darkened, the night sky behind them disappearing, as a massive pyramid-like craft seemed to materialize out of nowhere, framed by red lights. From their vantage point, roughly about 200 yards away, the two witnesses watched as the pyramid gradually began to rotate on its axis. At the apex, a bright green object was ejected at great speed, which took up position hovering in the night sky a short distance away. While this was happening, a series of what appeared to be lightning bolts issued forth from the lower far corner of the pyramid, which seemed to be striking the ground beneath it. These bursts of light were so intense that they backlit and illuminated the sheer size of the craft hovering above. More orbs were ejected from the top of the pyramid as the military jet continued to circle overhead. These new lights appeared to dance and mingle with one another as if protecting the main craft. As Clark and her friend looked on, a number of additional aircraft arrived. The four new arrivals formed up on the original jet fighter and then began to circle the pyramid craft in an apparent attempt to hem it in. At this point, two things occurred. The red lights marking the outline of the floating pyramid initially dimmed, then disappeared, also vanishing from sight. At the same time, the smaller green object, which had been hovering nearby, flared brightly 3 times before setting off at a high speed away from the location, bobbing and weaving as it went. Clark observed the progress of this green orb as it led the pursuing planes away and off to the west. Over the next hour, the skies above Penturk were filled with yet more activity. Other witnesses reported seeing unknown objects, which were in turn chased away from the area by a group of Apache gunships. Before all activity finally ceased, Clark and her friend decided to venture out into the field where the pyramid had been hovering in search of any physical evidence. But frustratingly, there was nothing to be found. Roughly half an hour later, after they had returned to Clark's address and were discussing the events they had witnessed, the pair were startled by a sound of a distant explosion. They realized it had come from the west, the direction in which the military aircraft had been chasing the green object. Clark figured that the pyramid craft must have been shot down. The following morning, with the entire community discussing the previous night's events, Clark asked her friends and neighbors if any of them had heard the explosion. Several witnesses stated that they had indeed heard the explosion, some even reporting two separate explosions in close succession, the first of which seemed to have come from the skies above, and the second from the ground, in the vicinity of the nearby forest. It did not take long to locate signs of an apparent impact. Sure enough, deep in the woodland, she found a debris field of countless trees which appeared to have been splintered or shattered as if recently impacted from above by a heavy object. Bizarrely, it also seemed to be snowing, but only in the vicinity of the damaged trees. That same day, Clark also visited the area where the lightning bolts from the pyramid-shaped craft appeared to make contact with the ground. Expecting to find the grass there burnt, she did find that all the plant life in the immediate vicinity appeared to be dying. Again, it was snowing, but only inside the field. Clark said that to this day, nothing grows in this area. Military personnel were also witnessed on the outskirts of Penturk, told passerbys that they were performing training exercises. But when plainclothes civilians suddenly arrived and camped out in the fields behind Clark's house, they gave conflicting reasons to local residents as to why they were there. Some witnesses were told by the outsiders that they were a fracking survey team, while others were informed that they worked for a cellular network. The authorities also enforced unexplained road closures in the immediate aftermath. The reason given was due to an overturned truck, but the number of highways that were closed, which included nearby highway, seemed excessive. Clark had spent the years since her encounter searching for evidence which might validate her account. She has revisited the crash site with local UFO enthusiasts who claim to have detected what appeared to be very high levels of electromagnetic radiation. Using the Freedom of Information Act, she also produced evidence from local air traffic control outlets, as well as geological and seismological data which she believes supports her account of the night's events. She has produced witnessed testimony from residents who say they observed objects that evening. They state that the explosions were so powerful that it shook their houses. Patients in a nearby hospital claimed that the sheer intensity of the blast shook them awake in their beds. But despite the efforts of Clark and other local residents, the authorities continued to dismiss her findings, stating that what she and her companions witnessed was simply a military training exercise. So I think this was a major UFO incident because the whole community was affected. There was a significant number of calls made to emergency services for help during this incident. And as far as the military saying it was just a drill, they usually notify before conducting drills. And in this case, the police didn't know what was going on. The government was left out of it. The media had no clue. And most importantly, those local residents were totally in the dark. They had no idea. Such a highly intense drill would also never be conducted over a residential area, especially at night. Not only because of the obvious disturbance, but because of the possibility of there being an accident. The British military itself still maintains that it was just a drill and that there was nothing to the UFO accounts. My name is Al Barrows. This has been UFO Disclosure. Please remember to like, share, and subscribe. Thanks.